Thank you for joining me for another episode of What Sayeth the Crooked Nose. Today I'm going to be speaking with a pretty inspirational figure. She had, much like me, found herself in a place where it seems like she hit the dark night of her soul. I certainly did. And when she was there and had somebody kind of pull her out of it, or at least kind of wake her up a bit, it seems like she really started along a path that not just benefited her, but benefited those around her. She has been on the Big Talk Academy. She's a certified speaker with them. Very very inspirational talk. Really just relaying how she went from a place of complete despair and shame and really no f's given to then being like, you know what, there's a lot more to life. Not only is there more to life, but I'm going to make my life better and those around me are going to be better, not because I'm going out of my way, but because as I show up as the great I am that I know I'm capable of. Well, she found that the people around her just responded, whether it be people noticing her adding beauty to the world, or just with her working with her, in the banking industry. Banking is not really known for people who have high vibrations, and so to have somebody who actually cares, who has those high vibrations, that has that high consciousness within the banking industry, well, what a wonderful way to start to affect that area for the good. And I'm very excited to see where this conversation goes, and I think that you're in store for another great one. Thank you so much for joining me, Smriti. I've been looking forward to this. We had to postpone this a little bit because of some health issues. I'm glad that you're better. You're looking pretty and vibrant as ever. And I gotta say that, and I mentioned to you offline, I was watching your Big Talk, and I saw that you had a map of consciousness, right? That's similar to what's in here, the power versus force, and you had references to the Tao and where you can tell when you're in flow and then when you're in that pure Tao state. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
right. So my heart was beating a little fast. And I wonder if you could just take the time to maybe introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your certification there with the Big Talk.
Oh, sure, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having me here. I've been looking forward to this conversation since a couple of weeks already. So yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled. And a little bit about me. Well, I was born in India and I did my computer science engineering there. So obviously very left brain oriented in my 20s and early 30s as well. And then after doing my computer science engineering, I started off working in the IT industry with one of the big MNCs. And then after that, I moved to UK. I continued my work. I have, worked in different spectrums of the banking sector now in 14 years. But apart from that, that's just one side of the story. I am one of those who's very much connected with my family. We are spread across, different countries. I've got the spiritual, religious bent of mind as well, or you can say my heart alignment is like that. And apart from that, I have always been curious and spirited to find different experiences. So I used to initially be a lot into sports during my childhood time, and then I went into more about anchoring and MNCs, and I always have had this feeling that I am meant to contribute through my voice and make an
Hmm.
impact into people's lives. So that's what led me to doing my Big Talk certification, which was about being a certified speaker. So that itself was a beautiful journey, because it was a very interesting journey from having a concept in mind that I'm good at speaking, but then there were a lot of limiting beliefs that I had to overcome myself to finally go through that certification, to create a talk, to apply for the talk, and then upon selection actually give that talk. So it's definitely been a beautiful journey. And so I gave my first big talk in December last year, and now I'm preparing for one more application. So let's see how does it go. So that's me in a brief.
That's awesome. And yeah, you mentioned that you are really connected to your family. And then in your Big Talk, you also mentioned about how you had this conversation with your mom. and you just had no F's given. You were just miserable and, feeling shame, and flowers are dead. Was that like, was reflecting on the fact that you just didn't care, and here you are connecting with somebody who you've got deep love and appreciation. Was that what kind of shook you and got you out of that state?
Well, to be honest, that I am so glad that you brought that up, because honestly speaking, that was quite a defining moment in my journey as well. I have had couple of such moments, but that was quite defining one, because we already, we were all in, at least for me, I am definitely one of the people person. I love having people around, any conversation from football to swimming to politics to spirituality to banking sectors, health, anything. And I love having, in-depth conversations about such topics. And being away from home, especially during COVID time, and I was living on my own. So obviously I was pretty much confined, such that I couldn't speak to people again face to face that much. And the two time when I did land up trying to get out of the house, I landed up, once with the symptoms and one with COVID. So I had been like quite much at home because of that. It was again a different level of consciousness back then. Um, but the thing that happened was that it was again similar thing, right? So I had the fear level of consciousness, which was looming in every department of my life at that time. So I had the thing with my health, because I had fallen ill with those COVID symptoms and everything, and I had the prolonged one wherein it took like months to recover, like 2 3
Mm-hmm.
months. Then at the same point in time, I was alone at home, so my entire focus mainly was on work. And interestingly, I had gone into a higher role in the banking sector itself, onto one of the roles. And coincidentally, I worked with one of the clients for 3 months. And I must say, in a very polite way, that that was a very big learning experience for me, because when you have got, authoritative figures who are very adamant, and they are um, uh, I wouldn't say just procedure oriented, but when you're very short tempered and those kind of controlling leaderships, right? So I landed up inviting such kind of leadership for 3 months in my life, and that was making me really really um, anxious, to be honest, because always I had taken a lot of pride in the work that I did. But that 3 months were hitting me on my work life. They had already, it was away from home. And then, from a personal space point of view, I was single at that point in time. So, I was pretty much on my own. And then from my friends, etc. point of view, most of them either had gone back to India, or, they had their own things going. So it was a kind of isolation mode that had happened. And I remember at that point in time, I was just, sitting, and one of those people who loves, having things orderly and, beautifully cleaned and decorated. My house was looking complete mess when my mom had given me a call, and it was a video call, and she looked at the, background, and I could see that for first 2 days she had not said anything, but that particular day she was very concerned. She said that, I'm seeing a pattern here, and she was genuinely concerned about everything, and in a very polite manner she asked it, and if the house is not clean. And that's when I landed up for the first time talking to her about the fact that I was miserable, at work, in personal life, from a health space, from a mind space. And I remember saying this to her, that I don't even know whether my existence mean anything. I
Wow.
could definitely see the expressions change on her face, because she's very used to a loving, jovial daughter, right? So it was very difficult for her, but she's a calm, composed lady. So she obviously needs to keep on checking up. But that was the moment when I said that, even the flowers are dead and I just don't care about it. So it was that, the frustration, the anxiety, that low hit that I had got. Um, and to the extent I landed up having a conversation for the first time ever with one of the therapists. And I remember that they were asking me about, the different questions, which they tend to follow about how you're feeling and all. And I remember one question which they said that, what if you were no longer here, then how would your family feel? And I remember giving a very casual answer, I know that they'll go. That point literally sent shudders down my spine, because I realized that I was not in a very good space, because I would never have given that kind of an answer. I would have just just brushed it off as if it was not even a possibility. So that's what led me to the next level of growth, wherein it began the curiosity about what is possible. And I landed up and it was no coincidence, I landed up meeting one of the folks from EMF. I then joined USM and EMF, and that took me out to a whole different trajectory altogether. So I'm very grateful to that, because since then I've never looked back. And that's when you have seen those level of consciousness as well, you can actually identify that. You can see the pain, but you also understand that it is self-created in a way as well, because of our own beliefs and of our own inclination towards fear. But then once you transcend over it, then you can actually see, it's the two different shades that you're then able to make the difference of as well. So
Yeah.
yes, it was a big shift for sure.
Wow. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. And what's really interesting is I had my own path where I, found the dark night of my soul. And leading up to that, there was a lot of just rigid need for control, and just trying to manipulate the outer environment in order to fit in my model of the world. And it wasn't until, the last several months that, when I really started doing a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching, I was like, well, this makes a lot of sense. There's this chapter where, this is gonna be a paraphrase of, a particular translation, but this idea that, when men are born, they're soft and supple. When plants are born, they're soft and pliable. When men die, right, they're stiff and rigid. When plants die, they're dry and brittle. And so
Mm,
those who are rigid and brittle are
mm,
disciples of death. And those who
mm,
are soft and flexible are disciples of life. Doesn't mean that you're good, doesn't mean that you're bad. It just means that if things are just falling apart around you, well, you're probably a disciple of death, because death is when things decay and fall apart.
mm,
And if you don't want things to fall apart and decay and turn into chaos, and you want more order, well, how can you become more soft and flexible and to be a disciple of life?
mm. Yes, absolutely. It all turns around to humility and honesty, if you look at it that way. Um, that when again, I tend to look at it from a spiritual point of view as well, that we are all eventually powerful souls. And from that point, we are a part of the divine energy. And from that point of view, everything which you can call as the limit of goodness, that's where we come from. So the only way to experience it is through humility,
Mm.
because that's when we are able to embrace the high energy, embrace the all lovingness that we are. But again, it has to be through humility. And secondly, again, one of the beautiful books from David Hawkins itself, right, Eye of the Eye, when it says that anything which is not congruent to our truth, that's always going to come up. And that's exactly, and again, I'm paraphrasing there, but that's exactly the point, that when we are such beings of love, no wonders we tend to go ahead and see the other opposite side, or the dark side, as you say. And it's only through going through that we are able to do the journey and take the journey of being honest and discovering the greatness that we are. And that definitely requires a lot of humility there too.
Yeah, it sure does. Well, and I went to a sacred healing ceremony with peyote 2 days ago, and
Mhm.
I've never tried peyote before. For those who haven't, it's not like woo, all these crazy visuals. It actually just kind of a deep internal journey where you kind of tap into yourself. And sharing is sharing is pretty easy for me anyway. But for those who find it hard to share, especially things of trauma or sadness or limiting beliefs, it makes it easier. Like you can still tell that, like, hey, this makes me sad. You might even start crying, but it's very easy. It's very safe. But I was in a circle of about 15 people, and just seeing others go and just share their limiting beliefs, man, it was pretty empowering for me, because I'm really no different than them. Like, yeah, I may not be in this place where they are right now, but I certainly was. Everything that they're saying is like, hey, I recognize that. I recognize that not that long ago. Oh, I also recognize that. Oh, I also recognize that. And it's such a brilliant way when you share, right, with humility and authenticity. You realize, hey, you know what? We're all pretty darn similar. And we all come from pretty similar backgrounds. We all are effectively looking to move away from fear and move towards love in our approximate way of doing that. The problem I think that most of us get into is that, we really ultimately, and we may not want to admit this, but ultimately we value ourselves over everyone else, right? Because we kind of have to as part of survival. But then we value the opinion of others over ourselves, and that just has us spinning in circles and spinning in circles.
Mm.
And when we're so, needing to like try and like stop the spin and force, everything into place, well, that lacks humility. And the problem with that is it gets us directly focused on, well, this is all I need to do. Well, what if you need to do is coming from behind? Are you
Mm.
ever going to see it? What if it's coming from above? What if it's coming through the window or the back door? Right. And if it is, we'll never see it because we're so hyper focused. Nope, nope. Hey, I don't care. I don't want you to help me. I'm trying to do this. Right. What do you mean you have the answer? I'm trying to do this, and so we start imposing even more limiting beliefs and then growing roots in that. And it can be difficult to get out of. But once we realize that getting out is kind of just letting go, paradoxically, getting out of it is actually the easiest thing.
Mhm. Mhm. So true. Again, it's all about it's as you rightly said, right? If I can put it this way, we are all absolutely, we've got nothing on us from an emotional baggage point of view in the beginning, but it is just the conditions and the emotional baggages that we are carrying onto us, and considering that to be a part of who we are. And no wonders we land up struggling in that sense. But again, it is as simple as that. It's not a baggage that we are carrying from birth. It's just something which we had acquired because of a number of things that might have happened. Then when we have acquired something in this world itself, it then, it's all about letting go of the same thing which we either which ways had taken up in this world itself. It was never ours in the first place. So, like we have this saying, right, that um, you were never born with money. You've just accumulated money over the period of time, and you're going to leave it around in the same world. It's similar concept, wherein we were not born with these baggages. We've just accumulated it, and we're going to either which ways leave it behind with us. But what is it that the baggages are actually indicating? And that's where I again tend to, have a very beautiful feeling that it's these baggages are nothing but the different, you know uh, big rocks on the road which you're just supposed to go and lift up and let go or just throw away from your life. And that's wherein you actually see the, the treasure which is underneath it, and that's our own authentic sense, as authentic sense and connection to our soul and spirit. So it's just that. That's how I
I,
feel.
I like that idea. And then, if you consider, all that baggage is almost like, weights around your ankles. When you lift those weights, immediately you feel like you can jump like 30 feet and just go flying through the air. And there's this idea that I got from Alan Watts, which I'm a big nerd of Alan Watts. And he talks about how a lot of people, well, most people, frankly, when it comes to karma and dealing with their karma, they see themselves as like this freight train, and they feel like they need to take the back car, the very far back car, unload all that bull crap, and then shunt
Mm,
that car to the side and go to the next car, unload all that bull crap and shut that, and it just beats you up, and it's just traumatizing. It's open up all these old wounds, like, and then
mm,
you can easily get sucked in.
mm,
Whereas the easiest way and the Taoist way is to
mm.
realize, well, the simplest way to let go of the baggage is to actually go from the engine and just uncouple from that first car. and then there's no baggage, because then you realize that, since time isn't really a continuous movement, it's a series of still frames, just like a movie. Well, these still frames are not who I am anymore, because I am who I am now. And if that's not who I am and it doesn't serve me, well, why do I carry it around with me?
Mm. And so absolutely concur with that thought. And if you look at it, right, very rightly put, that it is just that who we are as of now, either which ways. And this is something which I normally turn around and say to a lot of my friends when I'm having conversation as well. That who are we to judge ourselves when we look back in time? Because if you look at it, at that particular point of time, we had a certain particular consciousness, certain level of consciousness. We had certain types of things happening around us, which probably would also be dictating, where we are on an emotional level. Considering specifically if we are under level 200 of consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
obviously there would be things that we would be taking on from the outside world and internalizing it versus understanding that it's all about our growth and us projecting what we feel outside. So from that point of view, if we are in that under 200 level of consciousness, it completely makes sense that we are going to struggle. And we now, when we have outgrown it, now to look back and try and judge who we were and say that, I should have done this, or I should have done that, or he should have done that, or she should have done this or that, it's just futile, because we can never recreate that, as you said, snapshot of life after being in a very different comfortable snapshot, and then going back and judging it just it's absolutely futile. And more so, what I tend to see is that rather what we can look at is, when we look back, we can certainly see again all the dots connecting, that had we not been that in that moment, we would have certainly not grown to have those challenges
Mm.
or those difficult scenarios, and the overcoming of difficult scenarios to be the versions that we have become. um, and it was a very beautiful conversation which I was having with my brother yesterday, and it was around the fact that, about problems, when you, like, my dad has this beautiful quality when he's able to see a problem from a mile ahead, right? So, he'll be telling you exactly that, this is the problem you're going to face, this is the problem you're going to face. And my mom, on the contrary, she is like always about giving the solutions. Now, earlier I used to have difficult conversations with my father, stating that, what, that you're just looking at it from a problem standpoint. But while having a conversation with my brother yesterday, I was just saying that, what, now I realize it, that I am like so grateful for the way I have been brought up and the beautiful armed forces background that we had. It definitely had a discipline element. But earlier I used to crib about it, but now I don't, because imagine, had it not been that ways, then how would I have the capability of maintaining my discipline and seeing the problem and finding the solution at the same time, which has definitely served me in my professional, in my personal area and personal life. So yes, absolutely. It's like we are all accumulation of all our experiences, and nothing is wrong. It's absolutely as it's supposed
Well, and then if we have an experience that we perceive as negative, if we just open ourselves up to the possibility, hey, what if this is a gift that I just need to unwrap, right? What if there's
to.
something hidden below the surface of this that's actually here to serve me? And and if we look at it that way, well, then it puts the impetus on us to change, and on us to raise our consciousness to see it, right? Because if, as we're raising our consciousness, we're almost getting like a bird's eye view of it. And sometimes you need to be able to pull back to be able to actually see what's there in front of you. Because if you're too close to it, well, then you can't actually see what's there, because it's obscuring the vision, and it's really messing with the feelings. But when you raise your consciousness, the feelings kind of let go. You kind of tap into this sense of gratitude, like, okay, well, what does this have for me then? And having that curiosity and just poking around to see where it can take us, and leaning on the lessons that we've learned, can really be an incredibly empowering moment. And I'm curious, have you shared that with your dad? Because I'm sure that he doesn't mind necessarily throwing that out there, but he probably doesn't feel great if he knew that like it hurt people. But if he realized like, hey, it was hard for me to deal with, but I'm actually quite grateful that you gave me these tools. Yeah, have you shared that with him?
Well, I remember having, so actually I'll be going to India, in April. So I'm pretty sure I'll have that discussion, face to face. That'll be even better. But I remember once when I had mentioned a similar thing to my dad on phone, and he turned around and said that uh, I am doing, I am sharing this information, but it is either a warning or an example, and it's for you to choose as to how you choose it.
Mm,
so,
very
so
wise.
yeah, so that's how he says it. But yes, this particular incident I've not told him. Probably I'll tell him when I meet him.
That's cool. I like that. And so India, huh? You now currently live in the UK, is that right?
Yes, currently I'm based out of Reading, very close to London. So
Okay. And
yes.
what brought you out there to begin with?
Oh, so I think so. It all began from work because I, being a computer science engineer, I had joined one of the banks through a IT service company,
Hmm.
and so I've worked with now top three banks and one investment bank over here. Again, from a professional standpoint, so it's just that, and I've been definitely left brain quite a lot for a while in my in my life. So it's the accumulation of that. I'm currently working on the data analytics side, again, pretty left brain. But it's that's the beauty of things coexisting. A left brain, but the beauty of the right brain. So it's just, yeah,
Yeah,
that's all.
and have you found that because banking industry isn't really known for really having high vibrations or having a sense of community. It's more of like, hey, did we meet? Are we meeting regulations right to the letter of the regulation, or are we not? Right, and if we're not, how do we zip that up so we don't get fined? And have you found that things that become you know like do you stand out, do you kind of alienate yourself with your higher consciousness, or do you find that because it's so foreign people just want to be around you more, or what's kind of your experiences?
Oh, that's a lovely question. I remember that when I had done my talk in December as well. So that was all about loving ourselves and
Hmm.
how that can impact our environment, and it was all about the conscious levels. And I wasn't sure as to I whether people would understand it from that level, or from that eye, that viewpoint at work. So initially I never shared it with anybody, but it's interesting that one of my colleagues, she actually found that talk and she gave it to everybody. It was within like 1.5 days actually. So
Mm.
before I think, she had found it and she had shared it with everybody, and it was very interesting to get the views of different people around me, wherein even though it cemented the factor that even though everybody is working towards the target, everybody has got a work persona, wherein that this is what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to follow X, Y, Z, and everybody's doing it. But beyond that, eventually it is all the same human beings, the same spirits, the same souls who are eventually working there. And one of I do tend to believe that it is our level of where we are. That's the type of people we tend to,
Yep.
attract as well. So earlier, in my last to last client, one of the clients with whom I had worked, that was the time when I was going through the phase which I spoke about earlier. But since then, since I've done my EMF and I've moved, consciously chose to be on the above 200 levels of consciousness wherever I can. I mean, I always visit lower levels as well, but then again I do tend to take that as a responsibility to jump back. But what I've noticed is that the kind of people that I've got to work after that have been very different, even within the banking industry as well, especially under the agile model that has come in. That has certainly had a very different wave of people. At least that's what I now perceive it as. That banking industry people are full of people who are committed to go ahead and deliver things on time because that is a regulatory ask. But within that framework, within that obligation, they are human beings who are supporting each other to go and get the work done. So that's the perception now that I have since my last clients learnings that I had taken. But it's definitely very humbling to see that people were talking about consciousness, and that too from different perspectives. Some were talking about it from religious perspectives. I had people talk about the same thing through meditative perspectives.
Mm.
There are a lot of people, as you mentioned, who just want to get the work done, and they tend to think that they believe in themselves, and from that perspective. But it is interesting that there is a segregation of um thoughts. It's interesting. It's very interesting to see the different side of it.
Well, and what's funny too is that the people who are like, well, I'm just here to do my job and I need to focus on myself. Um, I mean, they're really not wrong. They may be going about it in a way that doesn't necessarily serve them to the highest level, because at the end of the day, what's most important is our God self, right? The spirit, the infinite self, not this, right? This is
Mm,
here to help us play the human game and help us,
mm,
understand the experiences that are there to be able to experience when we're limited. Because if we're an
mm,
unlimited being, well, how can we ever understand the experience of limitation, or rising above that limitation, and how terrifying it can be at first, and how freeing and amazing it can be afterwards. And so it's funny, because it's like the soul can kind of start whispering in your ear, and you'll find yourself kind of walking in the right way, but not necessarily along the correct path, or rather not along the most productive path.
mm,
And I certainly have found myself in ways where you know um, I wanted to help. I wanted to help others get out of their misery. I wanted to help in a political way to help offset a lot of the hardship that it seems our politics just kind of creates for working class and poor people. And but I went about it in a terrible way. I was going along the wrong path. I had need for too much control. I was very loud, and it was like, hey, I've got better ideas than you. How do you know? Because I yell really loud. And in fact, let me just yell a little bit louder so then I can prove my point. And then oh, you don't understand yet. Oh, well, let me yell a little bit louder. Do you get it now?
mm,
And and it didn't really help anybody. It
mm.
made me feel in the moment like I was doing something. I don't know if you ever seen The Simpsons. There's this little character, Ralph Wiggum. He's like, I did something, right? And it's kind of like that. And I was really chasing my tail and exhausting myself, and my life was not in a good state. And here it is with complete hubris that I'm like, well, hey, just wait for me to come save you as my life is falling apart. Like, and I
Mm,
didn't really have the ability to step back and consider that. It was more of an escape for me. And if I'm
mm,
escaping, well, then I'm not bringing my authentic self, because I'm too busy fleeing something.
mm,
And
mm,
if I'm no longer escaping, I'm now happy with where I am, and I'm able to dig roots and become much more strong and grounded while also still reaching into the heavens. That's when real transformation comes. That's when people are inspired. That's when people stop and admire a tree for 15 minutes, right?
mm. Yeah. You've had a fantastic journey as well. I mean, again, I always turn around and say that people's journeys are always, between the highs and the lows. That's where the magnitude of the journey lies. And I completely understand where you're coming from. Um, at a point in time, I again, not in the same, arena as you, but I had the similar kind of a behavior wherein I wanted to help people. Um, when it even if it meant just helping people out in the colleagues and in the office space in different realms in at home. But what I realized was that it was it was um, a hiding technique, because what I was effectively was doing was that I and it goes back to the statement that I made earlier. It was all about the humility and the honesty, because I was not being able to be honest with myself and actually look in the mirror and see as to who I was projecting myself as at that point in time. So all my energy and effort went either in doing the work in order to go and be busy being busy, or try and assist other people in their emotional traumas, so that the focus would always be in the external realm
Yeah.
versus the light being shed onto myself, that it's me who needs the help here more than anybody else. And it's been a journey wherein it again goes through again different levels. But the point wherein we are able to have that, again, I go back to levels of consciousness because that's like one of my favorite topics. But that's the point when we have that courage to look into the mirror and look at it from a very honest perspective, not from a judgmental perspective, but an honest perspective, that what, this is what I have done so far and this is where I've come now. And that's without judgment, that nothing is right and wrong. It's just about, this is the type of pattern that I was running, no wonders this is there. And now who do I choose to be? And therefore, which particular beliefs or patterns am I going to create in my life? And the choice is mine. So I can either choose that, or I can go back to doing whatever I'm doing. So I think, so it's just that flipping point in our journeys as well. It's just that uh, decision, the important decision making time. But yes, that's how it.
Well, and I found in my life, at least, some of the biggest hardships have been because I didn't make that choice for myself. And I was so busy valuing the opinion of others. And there was a lot of chaos up in here. And I didn't really know how to ask myself quality questions.
Mm,
And, all throughout growing up, people are like, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? What I didn't realize at the time is that none of them people who were asking me that question had any idea what they wanted to be. None of them even had, not only that, but if they had an approximate value what they wanted to be, they're not even doing it. And they're putting these unfair expectations on me, which then it causes a lot of psychological, trauma for especially for teenagers trying to figure out, well, I'm supposed to have it together. Right? School just taught me to raise my hand and ask if I can use the bathroom. It didn't tell me how to actually be a good, how to find a path or find a purpose. And
yeah.
so I ended up joining the army. I had a big, outrageously sized chip on my shoulder, and I joined a totalitarian environment because what better, right? If I got a bone to pick with every authority figure, what better than to join the army, right?
I get it.
And it made things much harder for me. But what's interesting is what it did, and the way in which I created a gift out of it is it created these obelisks in time that then I can look to and be like, oh, this is what happens, Josh, when you're in your own way, right? This is what happens when you think that you're the smartest person in the room. And this is what happens when you have complete rigidity and you don't allow yourself to be flexible and allow yourself to actually learn from people who have done things right better. And there was this idea that Peter had when going through EMF, and he said, if you consider that to the best of your abilities, that you're able to execute, right, that's brought you to where you are today.
Mm,
And this is why we need mentors. Because if you want to go above and beyond where you are today, well, don't you kind of need somebody to show you a way who's actually where you want to get to? Say,
mm,
oh, well, that makes a whole lot of sense, actually. And so looking to people who are where I want to go, rather than just to look to people who I enjoy having a conversation with and then ask their advice when, like, what the hell do they know? Right.
mm,
And so having the ability to learn how to ask myself better quality questions, and then also tune into myself to be like, hey, does this feel right? Hey, does this feel like something that would be good for me? And it's been transformational in my life.
mm. I can imagine that completely. Um, so I was born and brought up in an armed forces background. My dad, he retired from the armed forces itself. So I completely
Mm.
get the flavor that you're speaking of. And I do tend to feel that that's where, for me, and that's a probably I'm going slightly on the tangent, but what I saw was that growing up and then, being in an environment wherein, there were that we were responsible for what we are doing. And that was like pretty much ingrained in me as well while I was growing up. And then when I moved out and I started working on my own, and that too in a civil setup. So there's it was again a transition point for me, because everybody could do anything and everything that they wanted in their own perspective. But what I started realizing was there was, again, pros and cons of both the world. Um, None was right or none was wrong. But then effectively, what it burnt down to was that who is it that I want to be, and who is it that, what is it that I want to do? What's my choice? And I get the point when you said that, many number of times it's just choices or not making choices that land us into, trouble. And I did go through the same as well, wherein my way of hiding used to be not to make a choice and then do the best in whatever I am in, because then I have to swim. There is no other alternative.
Yep.
But then effectively not making a choice was also a choice. Um, but yes, it's been interesting that it's eventually effectively comes down to our own authenticity, and for us to lead to the point of asking this question as to what's my authentic self, one would have to experience what is not,
Mm.
because only then, when you are in that space of inquiry, can you look at different things that you have done, or you have pretended to be, or you have um, falsely projected oneself to be,
Hmm.
and you realize that, what, there is a separation and there is gap between what that person is feeling and being, and versus what I actually feel and what I actually a sense is. I think so that journey is vital for everybody. So I tend to think that people would probably take that journey in their own space, in their own way. But I think so that's one of the essence of transformation in every human being's life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I mean, as humans, we relate things to their polar opposites, right? Tall and short, before and after, hot and cold. And if we didn't have the polar opposite, then we wouldn't fully appreciate or understand what it is. And so you're right that it does take that understanding of being drawn by our inauthenticity to understand what our actual authentic self is. And that's the gift, is that when we're inauthentic and we create problems for ourselves or create conditions that are unsolvable just because we are alienating what is, our true power or our true ability to be able to move past those obstacles. Well, then once we unwrap that gift, like, oh, well, that makes sense. Well, and if we learn from it, well, then we no longer have to do it again. Right? There's a Canadian psychologist who I really like by the name of Dr. Jordan Peterson. He talks
Mhm.
about most people, when they want to try and do something new, well, they often have to do it stupidly because, I mean, what the hell do we know, right? And the thing is, if you give yourself the freedom to try it stupidly, well, then you can see what didn't work, and then maybe what did work. And then if you
Yeah.
start building upon what did work, well, then you no longer have to be stupid, and you can keep building upon what does work and what does work, and find yourself in a much better situation.
True. And two things to add on that. On the last bit, on a very comical note, well, not comical, but a sarcastic note rather, would be that I was having similar discussion once with my the speaker mentor, and it was very interesting. The answer that I got, and it was that if what you did for the first time was your masterpiece, then it means that you've not grown anything and it was a very short-lived journey. So now, whenever I pick something for the first time, I am very curious and very excited because I know I will make mistakes. But then that's the part that, then that means when I complete it over the number of years, that'll be my journey. And that is when I would love to see my masterpiece, not on the first day. so,
Yeah.
so yeah, that definitely is the thing. And I was going to say something else and I forgot.
No, that's fine. Well, and to your point, when the destination is the point and not the journey, well, relate that to dancing, right? If you and I are dancing and the destination is the point, well, why don't we just dance over that spot and then stop? Right? If the destination is the point, well, if we go to a symphony, It's just one crashing crescendo, and then okay, everybody go home, right?
Mm. Right.
And where otherwise, you wouldn't be able to explore, the journey that the music is taking you on, or explore just the feeling of being in somebody's close proximity while dancing, and
Mm.
navigating the awkwardness of maybe fast moves, and trying not to step on somebody's feet, and then learning and becoming better, and then feeling more comfortable, in the grip of somebody else.
Mm.
And to allow ourselves to not just experience that, but to learn and grow from that, and realize that that's the whole point, right?
Mm.
That journey and that growth is the whole point. Um, it it doesn't necessarily make life easier, in the sense that, like, you still have to do stuff, but it brings things into your realm that allows it to where you have more focus, and life is more fun. And so you
Mm.
can kind of tell where, am I allowing this to happen, or am I forcing this to happen? And so I guess, in a sense, I guess that is kind of easy and easier, but it doesn't mean that things are just going to automatically just change for us, overnight. Doesn't mean that, our life is going to radically transform overnight. We still have to take the steps, right? We still have to get out on the dance floor, right? We still have
Mm.
to follow the music. We still have
Mm.
to be in tune with our partner. Um,
Mm.
but it allows us to flow more and get out of our heads, and really allow it to happen, rather than wonder if we're doing it right, and then I step on your toe, right? And wondering, oh my God, are people looking at me, and I've fallen out of flow with the song, and I'm disjointing the dance.
Mm. Mm. I love that analogy, and I definitely do believe that there is a lot that a person has to um, go through in that time as well, right? Because you're not going to be able to dance as effortlessly and as in flow on the first day. And I tend to think that's where having the proper mentors comes into picture. Having, looking forward to people who've done that before comes into picture. And you can always learn the tips and tricks from them so that you are able to be better when you're taking those turns. But it doesn't mean that person would falter. And I think so that's absolutely brilliantly said, that that's where our journeys lie, because there would be some who would be really beating themselves up and feeling the victimhood of doing something wrong, and that holds them back. Probably their journey is to be able to stand up and have the courage to do it anyway. For some it is that not getting it right, but then that is the point of their journey. But and if they're not getting it right, probably to be able to humorously accept that they have got two left feet and probably give it another shot in a very unique way. Maybe that's their journey, right? But effectively, how do we choose to engage with the dance or with life? Either we can go stamping and screaming about it, and that's where we normally land up being if we are under the low level of consciousness levels. And not it's not that it's a bad thing to be under 200 level of consciousness. It's just that it is what it is at that point in time, because we are looking at life in a certain prism. But then when we let go and we surrender, then things become more graceful, they become more beautiful, they become more flowing, and then we can actually experience a life to be as magnanimous as it can be, as beautiful as it can be.
Yeah. Well, magnanimity, right? The idea that life is actually this, here to serve us a lot of greatness, and here to be, here for our ultimate good. And if we experience life as it's not, and that it's happening to us, well, like you said, that's not really bad per se. It's just letting us know where we are, and so we can calibrate. And if I'm traveling south, thinking that I'm traveling north, and then I pull out a compass, like, oh, whoops, I'm going the wrong way. I mean, does that, that may have perhaps impeded how quickly I could have made it to my destination, but it taught me to check my compass. It taught
Mhm.
me to learn from my mistakes. And if I don't learn from my mistakes, well, then I'll probably be traveling south again while intending to head north.
And another twist to it is that it comes to the same point, don't shoot the messenger, wherein just imagine if you if instead of you, because if you're just running in one direction at full speed down south, and if somebody just stops you or taps you to go out and show you the compass that you're actually on the wrong path, probably you would want to course correct. But many a number of times what happens is that instead of actually looking at the fact that we are probably not on the right path, and we need to do our own healing and probably change our way of engaging with life, we land up just shooting the messenger. And that messenger can be in terms of a boss, it can be in terms of a colleague, a partner, a loved one, parents, father, mother, children. They are the people who normally tend to show us the compass very easily. And that again is, it's just an indication, if we are just able to sensitize ourselves with this, that it is just a person holding the compass. It's not about the person, it's just about my reflection in the mirror at that given point in time, and how I can actually tune myself back to the north or east, wherever we want to go according to the compass. That would make it such more better level of experience of life.
Well, and that's one of the brilliant ideas of the parable of Jesus, when the Pharisees confronted him and demanded that he say which is the best commandment. Because if you instead of thinking him saying, honor God or love God above all else, if you don't think of him saying like some entity up in the clouds, but you think of him saying like your God self, right? Your infinite self. And then love your neighbor as yourself, because your neighbor is just coming into your sphere to say, hey bro, this is what's going on in your head. Hey girl, this is what's going on in your head, and I'm just here playing the script that you handed down. And when you go and interact with somebody, same thing. And if we realize that, it's like, oh, okay, well, now I can actually, what if I start handing down different scripts? What if I start handing down better quality scripts? And what if my scripts are no longer based on scarcity, but are now more based upon abundance? And what sort of people might come into my sphere if that happened, right? What sort of opportunities might present themselves if I looked at the world that way? And when we ask ourselves quality questions, right? The idea, right? Our mentor Peter Sage says that questions are the steering wheel of the mind, right? If you ask yourself a quality question, well, you will get the answer as long as you hold on to that question long enough, right? Most people, again, if they value the opinion of others, they might ask themselves a brilliant question, but the second that somebody else is like, well, that's a dumb question, well, then they might lose all hope and just give it up and be like, yeah, you're right, because they don't have a lot of defining characters, right, for themselves. They rely on others to tell them who they are, rather than step into their own greatness and step into their own I am and be like, well, maybe it's stupid to you, bro, but like, this is my movie script.
There was one beautiful statement that it reminds me of this, that imagine if you had the world, one of the world class, I mean, I tend to follow both Indian and English music, but let me for this point just mention that if you've got Celine Dion on one side, and who's such a brilliant singer, and if you say suppose had Steffi Graf on one side, who's such a beautiful player, but if they were, if imagine for the two things that these two people do, say suppose if Steffi Graf was supposed to go out and start taking in all the opinions about how she plays her game, it would just be from a different lens of a singer. But then Steffi Graf is never supposed to be a singer, or that's not her intention in life. So there is no point in looking at or listening to other people's opinions, because they are not on your journey. We as individuals are on our own journey. It's always good, and I have this mantra for myself as well, that I tend to listen to the advice of people, but that eventually what I act upon is what's my honest truth.
Yeah.
What does my heart and mind alignment in? That's what actually is our authentic journey, and just doesn't help to go and listen to a number of people, because they probably would be operating from their own wounds, from their own level of consciousness. which might not be resonating with us at this point in time. So our journey is not to mimic somebody else, not be a duplicate of another character, but be our own original character. So
Well, and then when somebody comes in and shares a limiting belief that would normally tear us down and normally put us in a tailspin, and then we are like, okay, well, I'll examine that. That doesn't feel right for me. I appreciate the feedback, but I'm not going to take action on it. Well, I mean, certainly that's a graduation event, something that would have put you in a tailspin that might have you crashing and burning, that now you can actually look at it authentically and be like, well, that's not for me.
mm,
No judgment, still love you, it's okay, love myself, and I'm going to do what's right for me. And
yeah.
yeah, I love that idea. And so this hour has gone by very fast, and I know. And so do you have maybe any final thoughts? And then also, if people, do you teach others, like you train others on any of your stuff, or are you just really getting into the speaking? And if you do train others, like what's the best way for them to reach you?
Oh, sure. So my message probably before I close off, it's very dear to my heart, and that's I've said this in a couple of forums, and I'll say this again, that it all starts with awareness, and we all know it, that every big historic change or any big change in our own lives, it's always started off from awareness. So if we can just take that little time on a daily basis to see as to where we are calibrating on our conscious level, just to see whether we are working out of fear or we are working towards love. If we can just make that one question and ask ourselves that one question every single day, we will start realizing the pattern probably that we are all running, and we can probably take action on it to become a higher and a better version of ourselves. And if we are calibrating at a place wherein we are doing things out of love, then how can we go out and not only just restrict it to ourselves but actually do it for others as well.
Mm,
So that's one invitation for everybody to just check that and tune in on a daily basis. That certainly will make a difference not only in our own lives, but imagine when people start doing it and just advertising it. Just one simple thing, the amount of impact that we will have just by that, I tend to feel that that will be tremendous. And as far as I'm concerned, I, as of now, definitely I do open up onto talks, and I that's the place where I'm training myself, and my masterpiece is yet to come. And other than that, I'm absolutely available on Facebook, on Instagram, and I have got a group which I'll be starting a little bit later in the year, probably in the quarter two. But that's something which is brewing up, and certainly I'll keep everybody posted.
oh, I love it. Well, and you said that you open up that flower that blooms while speaking. Well, Bhanti, Bhanti does sound a lot like banter, so that's very, very fitting. Very fitting.
That's I've heard that for the first time, but that's great.
Yeah. And your name, if you glance at it, could be like smart banter without actually reading it. So
Well,
yeah.
and my first name, Smriti, itself implies a memory.
Mm.
So it's just, so yeah, I'm pretty sure. I hope that I'm able to leave that mark, just so that it propels people to just ask a better question and probably find the answer for it.
I love that. I love that. And really, I mean, that's, as I take people through their healing journey, right? And help them heal things that, they may have thought were, incurable at one point. Well, I mean, what a lasting impression that gives. But more than that, when they go inwardly and be like, oh, well, if I could have blocked myself, I could have said this guy's completely full of it. But instead they went with it, and then they found the true power within themselves. And then they can carry that on for the rest of their life. And the idea of a lasting memory, I mean, what an amazing gift.
Yes. And I just truly want to say thank you for inviting me on your forum and for this lovely conversation. I learned a lot as well today, and I hope we have such brilliant conversations in future as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. You didn't ask about my awesome wooden bow tie, so I'll just mention
Oh,
it.
I
Um,
didn't. Didn't.
Yep. So
What?
this was a gift. I'm part of the local Chamber of Commerce, and the reason why I do that, and I don't know exactly how things work, in the UK or India, But the Chamber of Commerce is basically this group of, businesses that come together to help promote, and other businesses create networking engagement where businesses can come together, and people can find more clients, and where somebody can go look to, and it's like this amalgam of different businesses. Well, I did it because, when I go to one of these events, it's almost always a banker, somebody who works for a credit union, somebody who does like personal loans, or like help you, better your credit. And then here I am, a spiritual healer. And so so I'm trying to normalize, and I'm trying to go out there because I can carry myself in a different way than I think that most people who live in a woo-woo space.
Yeah.
And so I want to see what I can do with my unique gifts and my unique ability to spread the word, to leave that lasting memory, to leave that lasting impression. And my business is called Toward Goodness, because I've taken myself on a path toward goodness, and now I'm taking others there. And I'm finding that as I'm engaging in the world now, well, I don't have to yell at people, be like, oh, my ideas are better, let me yell at you just to prove it. I can now invite them to share, and they can feel the authenticity, they can feel the energy off of me. And
Yeah.
often it makes the conversations much more interesting, and a lot more fun.
That is brilliant. That's brilliant. And um, a heartfelt thank you for what you're bringing out in the space, because I genuinely believe that this is the conversation, um, which is not probably a very data oriented conversation. It's more about our sensory conversation, and about the inner realm of feeling and connection with who we are.
Mm.
And that conversation definitely has been a while since it's not been so mainstream, and it definitely deserves a space. So very
Aw.
grateful that you're doing.
Well, I'm glad that you've been able to benefit. I certainly enjoy putting these on. I invite people on who I think are going to be interesting. And I love that our peer group is basically, some of the world's most interesting people, that have some of the most, interesting knowledge and wisdom now that we can guide our lives, and maybe even help others just by living authentically. And they'd be like, you know what? I want to be like her. And yeah, well, thank you for joining me. This has been fantastic. I look forward to when you put on your group. Maybe we can, when you have your grand opening, or as things progress and see how well they're going, we maybe have you on again, and talk a little bit about how things are unfolding.
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure we are going to have more of these coming forward in future.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, I look forward to seeing that flower bloom more. So I expect to see more talks. And this has been great. And thank you again. Safe travels, right? Give your mom and dad a hug. And yeah, thanks so
Absolutely.
much.
Thank you so much. You have a lovely, lovely week.
Thank you.